I'm looking forward to this session. So if you're in this room and you're at this conference, you care about identity security. Either that or you're just looking for an excuse to get to New Orleans. But what are the trends in this area, and where is identity security going? That's what this fellow's for. Henrique Teixeira brings 25 years of identity, cybersecurity expertise, and leadership to his new role as a Senior Vice President of Strategy at Saviynt. Most recently, Teixeira was the Vice President of Research for Identity and Access Management at Gartner. While at Gartner, Teixeira chaired the Gartner IAM Summit. How many of you have been to the Gartner IAM Summit? If you haven't, you really need to pay attention and think about that. First week of December. And he was the Global Track Manager for IAM at all Gartner Security and Risk Management Summits around the globe. And, fun fact, he's the guy that coined ITDR, Identity Threat Detection and Response. Welcome, Henrique.
Oh, hello. Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Hey, we made it. We made it. Day 2 in New Orleans. Round of applause to you. Congrats, you made it. With all the temptations of Bourbon Street and the French Quarter, it's amazing. It's amazing to be here talking about a topic that is close to heart. But, hey, listen, I want to clear up one thing about what Sean said. Yes, Gartner analysts, they create a lot of acronyms, but Gartner analysts, they don't get paid for creating acronyms, okay? So I want to make that very clear. At least I haven't seen a paycheck, 0. But it is a very interesting topic, especially because this conference, if you look at the name of the conference, the HIP, Hybrid Identity Protection, so identity is in the center of that. And the way I present this to our clients, to our identity colleagues in the world, it's very much like a sitcom. I did research for a living, and the way I write research is about observing where the market's going and writing about it. And I'm doing that today with Saviynt as well, and with this presentation that we're going to be talking about. So this is mostly about you, and some jokes along the way. But when we think about identity, how many of you here have ever driven an electric car before? Okay, I don't own one. I don't have an electric car, but I rented one for the first time this year. And identity is ingrained in so many things in our lives that we don't even think about. So I rented this car with my family. It was a Volvo electric. And by the way, a Saviynt client, they use our software, but that's beyond the point. So this car, I thought, okay, I'm gonna get anxious about that range, right, of the batteries. But you know what was the biggest problem with that car, with the electric car? Was when it came to charging, right? And I stopped by a charging station. Guess what I had to do? You guys that driven electric cars. I had to take out my phone. I had to create a username and a password, and then charge a car. That's insane. And the next time I had to charge again, guess what? A different charging station, another username, another password, and a horrible user experience. I would say for me, as a user, that was worse than the anxiety of the miles I'm gonna get from that battery. And when I'm talking with clients like British Petroleum or Shell and other manufacturers of cars and all the things, batteries are running a lot of things in our lives. Our devices. If you have that pyramid of need, like food and hygiene and other stuff, I think batteries, it's in the very bottom. Even before Wi-Fi, batteries are more important. Or things like my mom. That's not her, by the way. But my mom is a doctor, right? Can you imagine, anybody's guess, what's the most difficult use case for identity and access management in the world today. There's two, healthcare and higher education. Because a doctor could be a patient, a visiting doctor into another hospital. So it is very, very challenging just to separate those things. And if you are a university and a hospital at the same time, it's a perfect storm. It's super difficult. External users, CIAM, workforce, it all meshes up together. Super hard for us, but also another identity challenge. Or enabling global trade. How many attacks you saw today and yesterday during this event that stemmed from contractors, external users that are not even full-time employees? There's a big, big challenge in that around, but the point is, identity is the way to be. That's why we have this conference here today. That's why I was number one on the list. Yes, I wanna speak there because that is a problem that I see and I work day to day for the last 25 years. And it's not going away. So myself, you guys, we've built amazing things. Your companies have built amazing things. Our job security is kind of good right now. We built those things. But guess what? Who is really looking for job security today? Guess what? It's the P of the HIP conference. The attackers that you need to protect against. So this may be statistics that you already know. 90% of organizations, 90% of you, thank you, have been hacked in the last year. So the attackers know where to go. And they go here. They go where the CIO is also thinking about. And there's a little detail about this. I'm not talking about CISOs, eh? This is CIOs. The CIO study for 2024 said that 70% of CIOs, they answered this little survey and they said, cybersecurity is top of mind for me. That is kind of cool, right? I'm talking about the CIO, the person with a checkbook signing an AWS contract. Said, no, cybersecurity, that is top of mind, which is a very good change for us. And when we think about how important cybersecurity has become for the business, and you may have you heard that analogy of, and going back to cars, why do we build big brakes on cars? Have you heard that one? Do you know that one? So why do we build big brakes for cars? The answer is we build big brakes because we need to go faster. We want them to go faster. So what CIOs are thinking, if I protect my enterprise, I can go faster. And when we think about what's the best way of doing cybersecurity today, a hint. The answer is in the name of this conference. The best way to do cybersecurity today is identity protection. It's a low-hanging fruit. Most of the attacks are against Okta, against Entra, against ForgeRock, against Ping Identity, against identity infrastructure. Most attacks, they are account compromise. Even before we think about lateral movement and privilege escalation, it's account takeover, account compromise. So if you are a CIO signing checks and you want to be good in build bricks, where do you put your money? Where? Identity security. I promise, by the end of this, you're gonna get this. Identity security is important. That's the whole message of this talk. And how many of you here today, you have been doing this identity stuff for more than 5 years? Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you have been doing this for more than 10 years? More than 15 years? More than 20 years? More than 25 years? Okay, Thank you, all the Gen X's here. And thank you for being vulnerable and showing up. Then you're gonna get this joke. But you remember when it was back in the 80s, we had one job in identity, which was the mainframe. Everything was inside the top secret RACF ACF2 machine, all right? And all the credentials were there, centralized. What happened in the year 2000 or the 80s is that this centralized stuff thing, so you may remember Windows and OS2, all this other good stuff that this centralized computes. So now you need to provision accounts, not in one central mainframe, but in hundreds of servers. That was my first job, actually, was implementing provisioning to distributed systems. What happened then was a lot of companies that invested in identity back then say, I need to solve this performance problem of creating accounts that used to be centralized in hundreds, thousands of machines. That's where user provisioning came from. And then something happened in the year 2000. Who remembers Enron? Enron, that American company. So Enron decided to cook the books, right? That was what happened in the year 2000. To say, maybe it's a good idea to do this. Maybe not. I'm just making, this is fiction now. But SOX came from that. And with that, you saw a lot of products in the market doing certification campaigns and role mining, role engineering, SOD analysis. Because of that, it became a regulation. And then on top of everything that we are doing for business enablement, now we need to do governance as well. All these certification campaigns, all this good stuff. And guess what happened in the year 2000 as well? Cloud, Salesforce was the first company, came out at the same day. So at the same time that we do governance, we also have this expanded attack surface that has been growing for 20 years, which is crazy to think about, eh? Because we're all familiar with Wiz, right? Palo Alto and CrowdStrike, those guys, and CSPM and cloud security. But they're solving a 20-year-old problem. It's not new, even though it's just 2 years ago, 2022, that expenditures in cloud infrastructure and SaaS is surpassed on premises. So it's very recent. So even though this thing has expanded through all this year, it's very hybrid. Guess what? The H of the name of this conference. It's a hybrid identity problem we have, right? What happened 2 years ago as well? I mentioned 2 years ago. What happened in the year 2022? My mom called me and she said, Henrique, I have this patient record and I'm looking into stuff. Have you heard about this thing called ChatGPT? I said, what? My mom, she's a doctor, a pediatrician. And she was mind blown. But that year was perhaps 2021. It became mainstream. AI became mainstream less than 2 years ago. It was revolutionary. When you see doctors, when you see factory workers talking about AI, when you see taxi drivers talking about AI, that thing is mainstream, okay? And what happened then? And I'm talking about now the Verizon data breach report and other attacks and the ones that I just showed you about the CISO, the CIO reports as well, is that at the same date, now it's mainstream for attackers to be targeting Entra, Okta, Ping, ForgeRock, and you name it. Attacks against identity is mainstream. You may have noticed this pattern, and like I said, this is like the sitcom of my life. I see things, I write about things, but this is something I can promise you, right? And not wearing my Saviynt badge or anything. I can promise you this. I can guarantee you this. And you can ask me for money if I lose this bet. I promise you that AI is not the last change in these waves. We're gonna see another wave coming up. Okay, AI is not the last one. And this is what happened. On top of user enabling On top of governance, now we need to take care of this new growing challenge of identity as a security problem. And you may have heard my company or other companies out there talking, yeah, we are identity security, but we take for granted what that means. Because if you ask different people, you're gonna get different responses. So one of the things that we gotta perhaps level set here is to understand what does it mean when we say identity security. It's more than IAM. It's more than IGA. It's more than PAM. It is a new way of doing cyber security. Okay? Identity security is a new way of doing identity security. It is about putting identity, context from machines, from humans, to make decisions in all those points. It could be endpoint, it could be data, it could be cloud, it could be network. You get the point. Instead of defining who has access to what based on an IP address, you make that decision on that context of the riskiness of that identity. Is this identity brand new? Is this identity just created 15 minutes ago? What was the last time this identity was recertified? All those type of things fluctuate the probability of that identity being malicious. There's also the consistency. So the same risk score of that identity for allowing that person to have access to specific portions of data, it has to be the same score you use for everything. And it's continuous. That's why the bed animation here is spinning. It's not checking that score just at the time of login. You log in, but also throughout the entire session of that user, that score may also change. That is identity security. It includes PAM, it includes ISPM, it includes ITDR, includes IGA, to make sure that we're able to collect that score, add visibility to those things, but also respond to those attacks. A way to look at this, and I borrowed this from NIST, is if we create a diagram, and this may be very helpful if you are a vendor in that space, is how you build a solution for identity security. It has to have all those elements. And I don't take any benefit for being creating this. I told you, this is from NIST. The identification layer is the visibility layer. Is about discovering where the risk exists. So you saw the evolution of the attack surface, from mainframes to distributed to cloud to AI. So as things grow, you gotta be more visible where those risks reside. And yes, AD is that cornerstone of a lot of attacks still happening there, but it's elsewhere. It could be inside of an LLM, the way LLMs are being accessed through an API, which we don't even know. Agentic AI, we're gonna be talking more about that. So the visibility is a super important phase here, just to understand where do we stand, where the risk resides, which is something easier said than done. And if you've seen my previous presentations on ITDR, they had all these 3 columns here, right? We built the huge protection layers with our MFAs. You saw presentations in this conference about passkeys, which I love. I'm a big fan of passkeys. IGA, PAM, all those pieces are preventive, okay? We're building these technologies as a big wall to keeping the bad guys out. This is a better way of keeping guys out, bad guys out, than just looking for their IP address, okay? So prevention is the first layer of that. However, what happens in prevention? Prevention has a very intrinsic characteristic, which is there's no such thing as 100% infallible prevention. Something will go through. Even with seatbelts or vaccines, there is a percentage of efficacy. Things that pass through, you gotta be able to detect anomalies. The same way the Semperis does, other companies doing, you gotta detect anomalies as they are happening and respond to that. I saw a panel here on stage say, yeah, that guy who created ITDR, he missed the mark. I say, yeah, I do that all the time. I miss the mark all the time. But the guy who wrote about ITDR, he never spoke about the response or the recovery. Well, it's part of that. That's why there's an R. All the backup recovery, the incident response, the way we respond to that, it's part of the ITDR discipline. But based on my observation today of the market, very few companies are looking at that blue column yet. There's very few out-of-the-box playbooks for ITDR today. There are for ransomware and other stuff, but ITDR, there's an opportunity. If you are a player in that space, playbooks, integration with XDR, it's a very important area that, yes, it's less mature, but it's part of the discipline. And one of the major questions I get is, all right, Henrique, I understand the concept behind identity security and why it's so important because it's top of mind of CIOs, but how do I get there? And I think having a maturity model, and this is what I tell Lucas, okay? Lucas is my son, by the way. I tell him this, and one day he was practicing soccer and applying for this competitive team in soccer. And I say, hey, buddy, what do you think? You think you're good? I say, Dad, there's a bunch of kids. They score more goals than I can score. They're faster than I am. Hey, stop. Yes, this comparing with stuff can help, and I like when CISOs talk to CISOs, but it can be very, can make a CISO feel like Lucas was feeling. I say, I can never do that. So what I told him is, and I'm not a good example of a parent. I'm traveling most of the time, so don't list everything, but this is a good one to listen. I told him, hey, I know it's hard to not compare, but try to improve where you were last year. Try to improve how fast you were, how efficient you were in detecting threats. I say, well, what is it? We're talking about threats, but no, it's for you. So most companies are here. They're in this compliance step of the ladder, right? They are still reacting for that 20-year-old Sarbanes-Oxley challenge of governance, certification campaigns, and auditors breathing on their necks, okay? I say, just focus on that, improving on that. And what a lot of clients are getting benefit today, a lot of CISOs, is that try opening up to visibility. You have those silos, you did a terrific job in governance, and you're compliant, you're passing all these audits by Accenture. Now, let's focus on cyber, right? Because the goal is there. And we saw it's inevitable. If you want to do cyber well, you got to do identity well. So add visibility to that. What other blind spots exist in your infrastructure? AD and other pieces. Then move one step up. Be more risk aligned. It's a different type of discussion with the board. It's less about talking, hey, I have 20 accounts that was self-service password reset this year, or all these accounts that were able to be revoked. Good metrics, but we gotta be thinking about what does that mean to reduction of risk. That's the risk aligned piece. Orchestration. You may have heard of Strata and other tools that can help you with integrate identity with SOAR. There's a lot going on there. But just like my son, before you get there to run and score more goals, just look at improving where you are today. Threat aware is where you can make business decisions based on the build breaks that you built. Okay? Build breaks so you can move faster. So you will be able to move faster if you have those big breaks in place. You could be opening new stores. You're going to be opening into new regions. If you say, I have a framework that is threat aware and is threat aligned. So I can build this store and I know this is not increasing my attack surface. And I brought up the CIO before when I was introducing the concept of identity security because this is top of mind for them. But also, we as humans, same as CIOs, because yes, CIO, you're people too, right? They have this struggle inside their minds. They have, hey, I need to keep the lights on, but also this need for innovation. It is a struggle. And that's where we're going to be using this as a framework for the top 5 trends in identity security. The first one that I'm starting to notice, remember, this is my Seinfeld mind thinking, hey, I wrote about this funny stuff I saw on Bourbon Street today. I saw this funny stuff happening with IAM leaders today. When I was at Gartner and I was talking to CISOs and IAM leaders, almost half, 47% of them told me, Henrique, I can't do this. I don't have enough people. And I know, I'm trying to hire people right now. It's freaking hard. And if you see these two numbers together, 64% of attacks are identity originated, and 47% of IAM teams are understaffed. It's a very big disconnect. So just bring it up. Bring it up with your CIO. Say, hey, I need to hire more people. And yeah, but good luck in finding people with identity skills. They don't exist. They are unicorns. They're super expensive as well. So we're starting to see this IAM skills shortage as a way to innovate. And I saw, I think it was Alex Weinert, one way that he thinks, and I agree very much, the way he thinks is, we gotta make security like part of normal life. The same way my mom is using ChatGPT, we gotta be using passkeys because it's just easier, right? So when we have that type of thing and AI to augment people, yes, we can embed more identity security conscious, even in non-IT people. So that's one way of looking at that problem. And yes, empowering the IAM leaders. I'm sure you're gonna like this one. What I'm saying here, give the checkbook to the IAM leaders. It's a huge minority of IAM leaders that I know, they have final say in signing IAM contracts. It's a minority. That has to change. They are hiring. They are building those walls. They gotta have the checkbook to take control of that. And the IAM leaders in the room here, and we saw at least 90% of you come from the identity space. You gotta be talking the language of the board level. And teaching them, say, hey, yes, remember 20 years ago or 15 years ago when we talk about all this Accenture, KPMG audits, that it is still important, but now we need to be more threat aware. So it's our jobs as IAM leaders, as cybersecurity leaders, to educate the board as well. Next one, cloud. Cloud is already an adult. Cloud is 20 years old. Cloud can almost drink in every state. In Canada, they can smoke pot. Cloud is still big. It's the biggest attack surface today for most organizations, especially in this hybrid world. And we have this dilemma of technical debt. A lot of companies today that implemented IAM to build that wall 15 years ago, they say, Henrique, this is getting very hard to manage. It is on premises. I'm spending a lot of money just to keep the lights on, just to operate. I have no time to innovate. Remember, skills shortage. So a lot of companies are also more cognizant of cloud may be good for some things, like cloud as necessary versus cloud for everything. You may have seen the results, the financial results from Microsoft when they went to Wall Street to announce the results. They said they're going to invest some crazy number, I think it was $10 billion in data centers from NVIDIA for AI. Crazy stuff. So it's like they sell AWS, they sell Azure, they sell GCP. Now there's all these different AI clouds, AI native clouds as well. And Microsoft is going that direction. guess what? Remember the promise I made? Yeah, the AI, generative AI thing is going to be one of the many waves that's going to come. SaaS security, digitization, all those other things are opportunities for us to innovate in that space of cloud. So don't think our job is done here just by buying Wiz and Palo Alto and CrowdStrike. There are other things that we can think about innovation. If you're a vendor, but also if you are a manufacturer. If you are using clouds today, there are many different ways to innovate using native services from those type of new clouds, AI-based clouds, for example. There's a guy that works with me, and his name is Vinit. Vinit Shah is a product manager at Saviynt. And he said me this once, and I say, man, I'm going to use that. It says, cloud adoption is inversely proportional to awareness. I said, this sounds like a book. You should frame that. Say, the more you adopt cloud, less you are aware of those blind spots in the cloud. So that's why you need Semperis, you need Saviynt, you need that identity security because there's identity everywhere. You guys remember when, and by the way, this is not mudslinging, but you remember the octopus, the whole crisis around Okta because yes, they are a big target because identities are inside there, but a lot of the challenges were because machine identities and other things were just spread out. Lack of visibility. They exist inside of HAR files, hard-coded, and people didn't know. And speaking of which, the rise of the machines. And you're going to see more and more this in the news, and it's something that is overdue. If we saw that ladder that I showed you before, there was part of that diagram that explained, we first had mainframes to solve identity problems for the workforce. Then we moved on to CIAM and customer external identities. Now we have this whole new space of machine identities. They say 20 to 40 times the volume of humans. And by the way, I have a personal beef with the non-human. Some companies say, oh, I have a non-human identity product. Okay. So what are you protecting? Cats' identities? Dogs? Cows? Horses? Because those are non-humans. We're talking about workload, right? Machines. When we think about Turing machines, it's a Turing machine. It's not a Turing non-human. But anyway, let me get out of the soapbox. Undeniable, bigger attack surface. And by the way, 80% of machine identities are dormant. They are created and never used. They're waiting to be hacked. So I really like low-hanging fruits. If you want to find that type of entry point for attacks, look for machines. And the same challenge happens with this type of attacks where most often than not, it's not a full-time employee, it's a contractor. And nothing against contractors, we got to do more of that. But that identity that doesn't exist in HR, it's not sanctioned, it's not part of your workflow, it's not part of certification campaigns. Guess what? Those are more risky. So we got to think of how to protect them just to operate. In innovation, you guys are familiar with passwordless. You've heard about passwordless, but I'm starting to hear more discussions around secretless approaches and vaulting federation for secrets, so you don't have to store secrets in a HAR file anymore. Okay? When we look at machines, yes, a lot of the security controls that we have for humans, we got to apply here. But there's 3 steps, okay? This is a recommendation slide. So every time you saw the little light bulb, I should have said that before. It's like, hey, do this. 3 things. Focus on discovering where the machine identities reside. Establish the ownership, because like a puppy, every machine identity must be assigned to a human, okay? You can't leave like orphan machines. And number 3, lock them down. Lock them down. So, discover, ownership, vaulting. Here, the trend number 4, inevitable AI. My mom's using AI. Everybody's using AI. It's an Oprah moment. You get AI, you get AI, you get AI too. You may have seen Salesforce announcement of forget what Microsoft is doing with copilots. The cool thing now it's agents, AI agents. I said, no, it's both exist. You need AI copilots. You need AI agents. Those are not mutually exclusive, okay? But agentic AI is a little bit of the tip of a new wave coming up. We are familiar with AI to be used to generate code, to sync songs, to create deepfake photos of Donald Trump kissing Kamala Harris. Now we're going to see AI being used to do things, to execute a workflow, to request access, to manufacture pieces of technology for us. Okay? They will behave more like machine identities than just this creative type of Gen AI things that we saw so far. So it's going to be changing. The use cases are going to be changing. The same way we do data security for LLMs, we may need to look at access management, access control, identity protection for agentic AIs as well. And I spoke about orchestration a while ago, and there is this interesting trend that I noticed happening as well. A lot of biometrics type of innovation that companies were researching and looking to adopt, it got a little bit of a pause. I think mostly because they are afraid of the reach of deepfakes, like the Donald Trump example I gave, right? As we see more companies deploying and even developing more deepfake detection and security for deepfakes, I see the adoption of biometric authentication ramping up again. So for AI, we got to be talking with lines of businesses, because most of the time, the biggest user of AI in your organizations may be the legal department, it may be marketing, it may be day-to-day email writing. So it's not necessarily IT workers, it's not necessarily even security workers. So talking to those line of businesses, we can preempt those type of challenges ahead of us, but also turn them into opportunities. So talk to the CIO, because the CIO is starting to understand the language of risk. Speaking of risk, my favorite manager, my favorite one here, and I asked in the beginning not to hold the whole Gartner thing against me. And you did it well. You're a good audience. I'm happy to be here. But this is something that is inevitable. If we are not identity first, the attackers already are. They know, say, yeah, endpoint is cool, firewalls are cool. I'm going after AD. I'm going after Entra. I'm going after Okta. It's a no-brainer for them. I'm going to attack this entry point here. What I think is the most effective way, and that's what I told Lucas, my son, is that visibility, right? So improving on that ladder is how we get to visibility. And ISPM was a piece of research I was about to publish at Gartner before I got hired by Saviynt, so I didn't publish that. But identity security posture management is the Apple Watch of identity. And what I mean by that, it's surfacing metrics. Like, for example, do you guys remember during COVID, it said, congratulations, you washed your head for 20 seconds. And now it can tell you, you have a good night of sleep. You reached the goal. You took 10,000 steps today. So how does it know? Things I had no idea. But useful stuff as well, like your VO2 max, your blood oxygen. It's measuring those type of metrics that were in a black box. I never knew any of that. ISPM is the same thing. It's about exposing metrics that you had no idea it existed. Are you doing a good job in hygiene? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you exercising frequently enough to withstand an attack? Guys, it's just like Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, right? If you're not practicing, you're gonna get beat bad. So are you doing the steps to sustain that fight, at least for a few rounds? Okay? That is security posture management. Thank you. And when we think about the innovation around that space, you start to see more co-pilots for recommendations. And I'm not talking about Microsoft Copilot, but that too, but all kinds of co-pilots for identity. Say, hey, you should do that. And when technology starts to say, you should do that, it becomes prescriptive. It's quite different than saying, you have a risk score of 4. So what? What do I do with that? The big innovation in identity protection using ISPM and identity threat detection response is going to be analytics, and AI will be more prescriptive. Like you go to a doctor, say, hey, I have a headache. Okay, take some Tylenol. I see this environment here. I have this AWS. I have a bunch of S3 buckets. It's risky. It's flashing red. Okay, you should run a certification campaign. Run this certification campaign with 2 levels of approvals, and then you should be fine. You should feel better tomorrow. That's what is identity applied to something prescriptive. The big idea for identity threat detection response today, to climb that ladder that I told in terms of maturity, is that yes, we all want to be in the competitive league. We all want to beat the attacker. And that's what I tell my friends as well, because they ask me, Henrique, you're Saviynt now, so do you hate SailPoint? Do you hate CyberArk? I said, no, I have friends that work there. I hate attackers. I hate criminals. Well, hate is too strong. I don't like them. So posture management, identity security posture management is the best way to improve where we are today in terms of that visibility. And because I learned this with Gartner, every presentation that you go like this, and I know it's a lot. You've been here for almost 2 days, so you're not going to remember this. But if there's one thing you can remember from this section, and it's okay for taking pictures and anything, are those 5 recommendations. Oh my God, this is way smaller than I thought it's going to be. I promise you, it was a bigger font. Right? But 5 recommendations for 5 trends. But just to recap, number 1, we in identity got to talk about identity with the leaders, okay? Talk with your stakeholders about threat, about SecOps. So the same way, and by the way, I come from the identity world. Threat is a new thing for me. I'm doing threat research for the last 3 years out of 25. So the same way CIOs, you gotta help them. That's the first bullet. The second one is, yes, you gotta still do the compliance things because of SOX, because of NERC-CIP, because of GDPR. Compliance is important, but try to start thinking about threat. Try to make decisions based on, yeah, I can show Accenture all these results, but am I also being safer while I do it? That's the right mentality. That's number 2. The number 3 here is helping us solve the skills shortage gap, right? We're not going to be able to hire fast enough. We know that. So use AI to fill that gap. Use things like passkeys as well. And number 4, Apple Watch. I'm not saying to buy an Apple Watch. Is give your CISO, give your CIO the visibility that they need. Where is the low-hanging fruits? Where is the attack surface that I'm not even aware it exists? Number 4. And the last one is prioritize hygiene. Sleep well, exercise. In our case, is, man, if you know 80% of your machine identities are dormant, go there, remove them. Simple enough. All right, this was fun. You were a great audience just to stay here through New Orleans. And after Bourbon Street yesterday, I saw some of you on the street. So for me, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Henrique Teixeira, and thank you very much.